here and for changing the front booth there.
Through the Mayor to Councillor Haynes, we would certainly look to put the cameras in locations where we would minimize that. Without knowing what the final setup would be, it's hard to understand what exactly where those cameras should be. But they are, multiple cameras do have the tilt, zoom, flexibility capabilities to move. So, what we'd be looking to do is put them in locations where they just need minor adjustments in the future to focus in on the areas that they need to, so that we don't have to make physical changes in the future. But it's hard to predict where council may go with the layout.
If I may, through the Mayor, just two more brief questions. You mentioned that there wouldn't be a cost of changing the chamber for electrical, etc. Is that because it's going to Wi-Fi? Wireless?
Sorry, just for clarity, through the Councillor Haynes, do you mean in the report that it talks about that we would be looking for electrical upgrades?
Yes.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons for that is the conversion to LED lighting and looking to minimize the load on the electrical panel. But we also recognize that that's a limitation to the base building itself. And should we need to address that, that might be better addressed through facility operations.
Okay, my last question through the Mayor. When we talk about the operator, whether it's one camera or four cameras, is that operator also the person who's going to be responsible for splicing the agenda into the audio-visual feed? So whether it's one camera or four cameras, that piece of work is a constant piece.
Through the Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question to our Director of Engineering. Is any of the technology that's been identified, have the words power over Ethernet come up yet? Because a lot of cameras, I understand, and tilt zoom, they're powered over Ethernet cables. They don't necessarily require heavy electrical requirements.
Through the Mayor, or sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's not a term that I'm familiar with, but it's probably correct. It wasn't as much the power requirement as just the extra components and loading into the electrical panel that was a bit of an issue. But as I explained earlier, that's kind of a base element to the building itself, and something that we can address through our facility operations operating.
All right, thank you so much. All right, next on the list, Councillor Brownhoff, and then Councillor German, and then Bryce, and then Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to staff. Could someone please explain to me the agenda management system and why that can't be implemented at the same time?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Brownhoff and Council. Really, it's twofold. So the money for the agenda management system is being presented to Council in the 2016 budget, so that has not been approved at this point in time. And secondly, there's simply too much on work plan for legislative services to actually do anything with that until later in the year.
So it's not software, is that component just for council, or would that not be beneficial to the public watching the podcast?
Through Mr. Mayor, the agenda itself will still be synced to the podcast, but the more fulsome agenda management system that those councillors, for example, who are directors of the CRD would be accustomed to, would be what we would ultimately be looking to. And so that it has efficacy all across the board to council and the public, potentially. And it will depend, of course, on which modules are chosen and how quickly we can have those integrated.
Okay. And then my last question to staff again, Mr. Mayor, is around with these multi-view points of these cameras, is there any special requirement for us to get speakers so that they know that they're speaking, and there will be video camera or videotape, and that will be posted on the website? Is that will we have to do something like that?
Are you thinking about a notice, Councillor? Are you thinking about a notice?
I'm sorry?
I thought you said speakers.
Yes, public speakers, not us.
Yes.
Public speakers and
Yes, through the Mayor, that will be part of the entire rollout. We'll be ensuring that we are complying well with the privacy impact assessment and making sure that there's adequate notice to our public at the time of speaking on the website and here as well.
so is there an opportunity if someone wants to speak but they don't want their face shown on would that be something that would be allowed? Like in council, I'm just thinking of young children speaking at the microphone and what parents might think. So,
I think typically the notice, I mean, we'll get an answer through the legislation, but typically the notice advises parents that their children will be on camera. And that's usually the notification. It's more of a disclaimer than it is a Q&A or an ability to obscure anybody. That's been my experience anyways.
and it'll be published on the website, and they have to sign off to authorize that. Okay, thanks.
Councillor German.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will support the motion that's in front of us. Firstly, the difference, of course, is virtually within the budget of option 1 versus option 2. And really, the difference in price is only the capital cost. After that, it becomes right the same. So we have a difference potentially of $41,000 in the first year, and after that, they're equivalent. And the functionality, I would agree with other speakers, that we get for option number 2 will be dramatically different than the functionality of option number 1. Essentially, we're putting in a small studio, is what we're doing, with all the abilities that entails. I don't think there's going to be a lot of power requirement for pan and zoom on cameras. Those are just small electric motors, and electric motors really don't require a lot of power. So it probably shouldn't be a big thing. And then, of course, these are the current estimates. We will presume go out for an RFP, and it's quite possible that we might see something lower for the RFP. But when this goes together, especially when you start to look at the cost over 5 years or something like that, I think there's absolutely no reason why we wouldn't go to option 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At first, I was reluctant to go with option 2 because I was under the impression that what I consider to be the electronic agenda management wasn't going to be embedded. I'm taking it from what staff has said that if we go with option 2, with its cameras and all, that a member of the public could, a week from now, click on February 22nd, Council, Section E, or F, resolutions for adopting webcasting, and go directly to that. Can I have confirmation that would be?
Through the Mayor, I think there's an important distinction to be made between the indexing with the agenda that happens as part of webcasting and the agenda management software. The indexing will happen. Agenda management software is much broader. It goes into the production of the agenda, approval of reports, pulling back and stories as well as the sort of front end. So yes, the indexing will happen as part of the webcast, and that will be made clear on the website, and so we'll be able to go to that particular agenda item and see the video of that particular date.
Thank you. I had sort of started putting the pieces together and figured that out because I think that for most members of the public, they're not hunkering down to watch 3 or 4 hours of this council as just kind of a fun night. But they will be interested to know, after seeing a public agenda, just exactly what the debate was, what the decision was, and what their council came to. And they'll want specifically, I think, to go to particular items. I know myself, I go on to the City of Victoria's agenda from time to time when I know they are discussing something of a general interest to the rest of us. So with that background, I am pleased then to support option 2 because I think that, I think it gives us everything that we're looking for.
Thank you. Councillor Sanders, and then Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was kind of supporting option 1 as well, but I do like the fact that it would be linked. It's not that important to me. CRD is got to be the worst example you use for one camera, but there are other municipalities that one camera. I actually like to see the entire camera of the audience so that you can see the reaction between people, whereas when you get zooming in on a person, it's very much in isolation. But that's fine. I will go with whatever the vote is here, because I think the fact that it links to the agenda, I'm pleased that people can go and pick out one item rather than have to go through the whole thing. The other thing I would be concerned about is that some people will be intimidated by that fact that, it's right on them rather than, a broader scope. And I belong to a Toastmasters group, and even though people come to learn to speak, there are some that will not be filmed. We film everybody's, record everybody's speech, and there's some that are quite adamant. So there are people that get intimidated by the process. What I'm looking forward to is the time that we come down the road and we get into the CRG with the legislative, and for us who are doing this as our job and we do our work, and the ability to have that agenda in front of you and go through the meeting is just so incredible. So for me, that comes way before webcasting, but that's fine for the public. If they're going to enjoy us, I'm with Councillor Bryce. If somebody's going to crank up and see us as they want to spend their evening watching us do our thing, then so be it. We will all now be TV stars. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch, to finish.
To finish.
Well, I'll get a say.
I was going to say, I don't think I'm going to go last. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we'll be internet stars, maybe, but not TV stars. I just want to clarify with staff, because I've heard a couple of times now, and maybe it's just my misinterpretation, that option 2 enables the syncing with the agenda, which implied that option 1 doesn't, but I don't think that's what the report says. I just want to confirm that that's right. Okay. So I'm going to be stubborn. I'm going to say I wanted option 1. I've held from the beginning that this needs to be a fairly basic operation. I'm with Councillor Bryce. I don't think anybody's tuning in to watch the glitz and glamour of a council meeting. I think it really is because they were unable to attend and want to catch up. I don't think we need the high production value. I appreciate the work staff has put into this. I appreciate that this is already a stripped down version of what we were presented with earlier, but I'm still reluctant to go that extra 1/4 of the way. Just on the principle that I think we could have done it a lot faster and a little more basic. But that being said, I'm quite happy to see this moving forward. I think that it will definitely add value, and I'm pleased to see Saanich taking its place among the group in the region that provides webcasting, and I look forward to it finally taking place.
Thank you. I'll just add some quick comments here. For me, it's largely based out of my experience, having watched a lot of CRD video and having watched a lot of City Victoria video. Usually on the one subject, you all know what it is. But although, I don't think we're going to, if we did have one camera, it's not going to be as poor as the CRD experience. I need to heap more on that. But the star of the CRD webcast is the pop light in the ceiling. It's in a terrible location and backs at the heads of residents. But the thing that compels me more to go with a multi-camera setup, more than just the cost increase here, and we're not procuring this right now, we're giving this back to staff. Staff are then going to go out and they're going to then procure it. We're not really we're kind of in an RFP process right now. But for me, the most compelling thing is when I go down to our archives and see the material that's down there. And we're essentially taking, I think, with this another step in our archival process, providing a nice record for people in the future to take a look at. And when I imagine someone 40 years from now on whatever kind of computer and whatever kind of internet looking at what we're doing, I think it's going to be a much more pleasant experience for them. They're going to be far more engaged as researchers, and for other reasons, when they can see the faces in the presentations, and it's more of an experience of being in the chamber. It's going to be more of a time capsule for people to actually come back and see what it was like here. And so for me, that's largely why I'm supporting it. Who knows? I may be in the archive in the future, going back and looking at what I did and reflecting on it, and might just see exactly what kind of shirt I was wearing. So with that, I'll call the question on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Murdoch and Councillor Sanders are opposed. That motion carries. All right, Madam Clerk, would you please introduce the next item for us?
The next item for resolutions for adoption is a report from the Director of Engineering dated February 16th, recommending that Council approve a 2-month pilot that reconfigures the Council seating at floor level and replaces the Speaker's podium with a seated desk.
Move to recommend.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Plant, Haynes, and then Miller.
Well, that's the move on which.
Of course, sorry, I didn't notice that.
I'm a bit
Councillor Haynes, go ahead.
I'm a bit troubled by the $800. I mean, I'm being facetious. I look forward to the pilot, and thank you for bringing this forward. If we can get it for $7.99, I'm your man.
Councillor Plant?
Yeah, colleagues, I'm totally against this. I think anybody who is sat in the back few rows will have the understanding that they can't see us. We know that that other configuration worked. I mean, I can barely see the people now. And so to suggest that any sort of circumstance of us being on the same level compared to that is going to be worth considering, I think is wrong. We saw what worked. We're looking for another option that we don't need to find. That works. I would not support this for a 2-month, 2-day, 2-meeting. Thank you.
Councillor German, and then Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support the motion. I think it's prudent. I think for a very small investment, we'll be able to see just how it works. We were all concerned, I think, about the cost of changing the chambers. This will tell us whether, in fact, that cost is value for money. And the biggest single obstacle to people seeing council is 1, the angles of the desks, and 2, that monstrosity right there. And that we will remove and change, and that's the cost, something else. We may or may not need to be raised up in the future, but I think we can wait 2 months to find out if that is indeed value for money. So I will certainly support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a joke in there somewhere about elevating the level of debate, but I'll leave it.
I was going to musical desks.
We can try that. That'd be fun. We're going to have this new audio system, and we'll have them just plug it in. So I'm quite happy to support this. We're going to trade places on this one. I think for $800, it's well worth having a look to see what this configuration will look like for a couple months. It's just a test run the same way the other elevated platform was. I think it's important for us to be informed on possible options going forward. And we may find that this works for folks all the way at the back and people in the middle and those who can't see around this big black box. So let's give it a try. I'm quite happy to see it take place.
Thank you. Councillor Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly will be supporting our trial run. I think when we tried it a few weeks ago, and it worked quite nicely, and we've all had to kick it back box, so I'll say it too. We get rid of that, it'll make all the difference in the world. I've been doing a little bit of straw poll every time I meet with somebody or run into somebody that wasn't regular councillor chambers, and they say, well, what's the problem? It's always worked great. And Councillor Brown and I just had a meeting today. That was the like, hey, you've got a great chamber, and you know the response was it works. Why, you know, it's not broke, don't fix it. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to look at the configuration and move ahead.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too am going to support this. The only thing I would ask is, I see in the report that staff are just going to talk to Saanich Community Association Network. I think it would be important to speak to some of our developers in the region, because they're the ones who present to us on a regular basis, just to get their feedback on how it is presenting to council. I think that there might be some value in asking them, thinking of Triangle and some, Uptown, those sorts of people, just to get from a development perspective, not just scan. Thanks.
Ready to call a question? I think for myself, I would like to go back to the UF. It's been a pity that we didn't go back to this again. I remember a comment from people in the audience, they can't sort of see through our line of heads down on the side, right? The obelisk, of course, is the big problem here, but I think I can support going back to it for small amount of money. It's, I think it would, if we look down the road to perhaps changing the desk here, they usually are in some kind of configuration, and maybe that'll, well, while we have the cameras with the ability to rotate and do many things, I think it might help with the initial placement of it if we start with a U configuration. So that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Plan is opposed. That motion carries. Great. Let's move on to item F3. Madam Clerk, would you please introduce the item?
This is a recommendation from the February 9th Police Board meeting, recommending that Council approve sending a letter to the Honourable Susan Anton in support of the letters from the City of Abbotsford and the District of Kent on the issues of downloading DNA analysis costs.
Councillor Durham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will move that we send such a letter.
Second.
Councillor Brown for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if perhaps the motion should also include UBCM, because UBCM did have a resolution. They've written the minister, and maybe just reinforce the support of UBCM on this matter as well. If that could be a friendly amendment.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So that, any more discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question on that. All in favor? Opposed? Unopposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you on behalf of the Police Board and for ourselves. You have a question, Councillor Haynes?
I just wonder, Mr. Mayor, through Councillor Brown, did you think it would be worth going to AVICC? Because we would meet the 22nd deadline, because I see we have another motion going to AVIC in their report. No?
I'm sorry?
So you recommended it goes to UBCM?
No, UBCM has already dealt with it,
Yes.
so just support UBCM.
Very good. So would it also go to AVICC or not?
Once UBCM
agreed.
is higher than AVIC in the chain.
Thank you for that.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. All right, let's move on to item G1.
This is a report from Councillor Durbin dated February the 9th, recommending that Council forward the report included in the agenda to the Engineering Department and relevant advisory committees for comment. And those comments, along with the request to have their comments back provided at the earliest opportunity. And then Council direct the Engineering Department to review all the comments received and bring a report to Council again as soon as possible, indicating how to best approach the province and request the changes as determined to be appropriate.
Councillor Durham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As this report says, Blanchard Street for a long time has been, that whole area of Uptown, Saanich Center, or the shopping center next to it, and all of the Douglas corridor has the potential to become the urban heart of Saanich. But the biggest obstacle to that has been the nature of the roads that go through there. Blanchard Street being the one that I'm concerned with, but also on the other side. In fact, when, Uptown as a development has many good things about it, probably the worst thing about the Uptown development is the way that it faced Blanchard Street. And I remember when Uptown came before us, meeting with Mr. Nagel on site on Blanchard Street and saying, I would like to see this address the street more, and I'd like to see some street fronts and things of that nature. And he said, I don't disagree with you, but I can't possibly do it with this kind of street. It's way too aggressive, it's way too fast, and so on and so forth. It really is almost a continuation of the highway. And I think the highway should end at the fire hall, and you should realize that you're starting to move into urban Saanich. So the recommendation here is a fairly simple one. It involves closing parts of the lane that ultimately becomes a left turn lane when you get down to Saanich Road. The lane that borders the Save-On Food Shopping Center. This mirrors, in fact, what the Nigel Valley Group are trying to do on the other side of the road, or the other side of the shopping center, rather. And so it would be logical, and the reason why I held off bringing this report to Council for some time, it would be logical that the ministry consider both in tandem, and I think it would be a huge plus to us that members of the provincial government are connected to the provincial government or are trying to move forward in the same direction. The suggested changes, they are obviously suggested changes that might need to be tailored and so forth, for the actual application, but they would maintain the number of through travel lanes that exist there right now. So there would be no difference in that throughput. At the same time, you get some substantial area for additional landscaping, pedestrian features, and possibly cycling. I think perhaps the most important thing is you announce to the drivers that are coming up the highway that they are changing into something new. Just the mere landscaping and so forth changes, I think, could accomplish much of that. And if there was an interest, an entrance feature would probably do even more. And actually, in many ways, there is a safety element to this. I'm sure most people, members of council, have come out of the Save On Foods shopping center by that exit sometimes, and you are facing that one lane with usually not a lot of traffic in it, but very rapidly moving traffic, very aggressive, and it's a dangerous exit. This way, you would not face the traffic on exit, and then you would simply be in a merge situation with the existing room to merge that there is now, only probably much more safely. So having said those things, I will move the recommendations.
Second.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Councillor Plant, Councillor Bryce.
Thank you for bringing this forward, Councillor Derman. I would like to ask you a question. I'm curious in your mind, if there is any correlation between what you're trying to achieve and the potential problem of the proposed development that would be going up. We haven't seen it before this council yet, but the tower of proposed residences that we eventually will see. Do you think that that aligns with it or against it, given that there'll be additional people in the neighborhood?
I'm not sure it does either. If anything, I think it would be with it, because really the only change is for people who are coming up the highway in that lane that is adjacent to the hall and the fire hall and ultimately Save On Foods. That becomes a left turn lane. Now, that lane is not very heavily used right now anyhow. If you go up there, most times of the day, the three existing through lanes are very heavily used. The lane adjacent to Save On Foods is not overly heavily used. I don't think the change in Uptown would have a significant effect. By the way, one other thing that I should have pointed out, not only is that almost like a highway, it's treated like a highway, where we actually have deceleration lanes to get off of it. That's something that you expect to see when vehicles are doing 80 kilometers an hour or more. You don't really expect to see that in a 50 zone, and in my mind it's just overkill and waste space. Thank you.
Question to staff before I potentially even put forward an amendment, Councillor Derman. Question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Engineering. I think it would be best served to that member of staff. The triangle piece of property that as you approach Gateway Village, that is the separator between the outgoing Vernon and ingoing Highway 17 as it turns into Blanchard, that grassed area is a provincial area, is it not?
The median, yes.
Yeah.
And it continues on through. Could the Director of Engineering just remind us where the boundary is between the provincial jurisdiction and the Saanich jurisdiction?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Why didn't you turn Mr. Mayor, in terms of Blanchard and Douglas, is that, Blanchard, is that what you're?
Blanchard and Vernon.
Sorry, Blanchard and Vernon?
Yes.
So none of Blanchard or Vernon are operated by the municipality or own industry, all the way to Tomey, and then it becomes the City of Victoria's responsibility.
Thank you. I'm wondering if Council would be open to an amendment that would also include the opportunity for Saanich to investigate the opportunity with the province to perhaps put some recognition of Saanich or public art in that area. If we're going to investigate opportunities as to what would be possible in that corridor to make it more livable, I'm wondering if we should also ask about that piece of property. So I'm wondering if an amendment would be in order to include that, or if that's completely separate. I'm seeing from the municipal clerk that there was a suggestion that it would be separate, but I'm wondering if there's a way to attach it just to this study process so that it could go to the arts, cultural, and heritage as well. So I stop talking and let someone else speak.
Speaking order, if Council wouldn't mind, Councilor Durbin would like to clarify something.
If I could respond to that, Mr. Mayor, I did put into this the opportunity for an entrance feature, essentially at Ravine Way and Blanchard, somewhat with that in mind. I was tempted to add other things on other parts of the road and so forth, but then my own hope, common sense and caution kicked in. Maybe I don't have large amounts of those, but I really thought it would probably best to have a size of proposal that the ministry might be comfortable with. And I think the more things we add in, the less likely the ministry is going to go for it. So I would hope that perhaps Councillor Plant's suggestion would be a subsequent thing rather than part of this particular initiative for that reason. The ministry isn't known to move swiftly on those kinds of things. And I'm hoping that with the Nigel Valley hop happening over on Vernon, that we might get the ministry to see this as two parts of the same thing. Thank you.
Councilor, you finished?
I guess the question I would have then to the mover is the request then that a subsequent motion, or it's at another time? Because I'm happy to make a motion after this is finished